Thanks, Felicity. First of all, I'd like to thank Nuffield and the William Buckland Foundation for this amazing opportunity. I'd also like to start just by making a broad and mostly baseless categorisation about the Nuffield alumni. It's sensible. I think you can pretty much divide the Nuffield Scholars up into two distinct categories. The first one, on one hand, you've got the big thinkers, like broad brushstrokes, global concepts. And on the other hand, you've got the nitty-gritty, the scientists, getting down in the weeds with the finer details. And I fall into the second category. So for the past couple of years when I've been travelling the world, researching improved ways of finishing lambs on grass, I've found that I've really gravitated towards and responded best to the farmers that are really customising their systems to the nth degree. And when I found out that I only had 5 minutes to talk to you today, I thought I would just distill my topic down to 3 key strategies that are quite novel for the lamb growing industry, I think, that really zoom in on the farm at the individual level. Because we all farm in a microclimate, as you know. We all have different rainfalls, different elevations, and importantly, we all have different management histories, which means that our farm is always going to be different, even compared to the neighbour's paddock over the fence. So to gain an edge in lamb production or even any kind of agriculture, I think we really need to be leveraging what makes our farm unique and tailoring our system to suit our specific farm conditions. So the first example is multi-species cover crops. My mum and I have been growing these for a couple of years now on our farm. In this particular mix, we have 14 different species of plant. And this kind of blends in with what Jessie was talking about selective grazing in stock, and it's taking advantage of that. So throughout the season, depending on the conditions or the life stage of the sheep, they will be actively selecting different plants from these 14 different species, depending on their ripeness, palatability, or depending on the sheep's requirements. So they're actually customising their own diet to suit their own needs at the time. And as I say, that changes throughout the season. Generally, what we see is that they favour the plants that have the highest sugar content at the time. That starts from cereals early in the season, moving on to brassicas, and then they hit the legumes later in the spring. But that can change. You might get a high rainfall event and they go off the brassicas for some reason. But having the choice there means that they have something else to select. And it really makes you think, you know, when you go in and you sow a beautiful monoculture, say grazing canola, and you're like, oh man, this is rocket fuel. And you put the lambs in there and you're like, oh, they're going to go in there and get really fat. And the first thing they do is go around the edge and graze the capeweed, you know, around the fence line. And you're like, but that's really good. And they're like, but it tastes like crap, you know, or it's unpalatable, or it's a little bit toxic at the moment. So having these systems, as I say, it means that the sheep can customise their own diet. Next up, we have customised mineral licks, which is in a similar vein. We're not talking about generic products. This isn't, you know, created by a commercial manufacturer who is saying, well, what are, you know, the theoretical major mineral deficiencies of the average Australian sheep? Because what are the chances that that's going to be relevant to my farm? This is about soil testing, pasture mineral analyses on my own farm, and finding out what our specific deficiencies are or our specific excesses and addressing them directly. And the results of this really speak for themselves. In fact, the mix that my mum and I make is half the cost of a commercial lick, and yet because it is targeted, the value is exponentially better. And then finally, we have my personal favourite, the soil moisture probe. I think if you are a grazier in the room and you don't have a soil moisture probe yet, I would highly recommend that you get one. They are extremely valuable in decision making. And again, this isn't about generic measurements. This isn't about modelling of what's happening in the district. This is about how much moisture do I have on my farm. Jesse was talking about the importance of soil moisture holding capacity. And of course, we always want to be improving our soil moisture holding capacity. But in the first instance, it's important to know, even if I have crap soil, how much water do I have stored down there? Even if I've got, horse compacted soil, knowing how much I have is really valuable. I've just lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah, so even, again, this isn't, wait, now I've got it. This is particularly valuable and comes to the fore in the spring flush, which as graziers, of course, is the most important time of the year for us and where we make most of our money. So, in fact, the biggest single determinant of the magnitude of your spring flush is not spring rainfall, it is the amount of moisture that you stored over winter. So knowing how much moisture you have behind you coming into the spring, you know what your spring flush is going to do, and you can make really valuable management decisions based on that. And finally, I'm just going to leave you with a little bit of eye candy. These are some sucker lambs that my mum and I reared last year off multi-species cover crops. Straight off the mother, straight off milk, 52 kilos, 5 months old. So you can feast your eyes on those while I answer some questions from Felicity.
I think we can all agree they look magnificent. I have 2 of my last year's pet lambs. They're the only sheep on the farm at home. And I keep saying to them, you need to look like mutton. You look way too tasty. Quick, quick, quick. You need to transform or someone's going to eat you. So can you tell us a little bit more about the mineral licks and perhaps some specific examples of what you might be using and how you're seeing that play out with your livestock and your pasture?
So a really good example for a sheep mineral lick and something that's really low-hanging fruit if you're thinking about customising your own lick is copper. So copper is a really important mineral for sheep. It's actually one of the big ones. And yet the difference between adequate amounts and excessive amounts of copper leading to toxicity in sheep is really slim. So what you'll find is that in commercial licks in Australia, because we have some soils that are high in copper, some are low, the majority of the time they won't include copper at all. So if you're deficient in copper in your soil and you're buying a commercial lick, you're not going to overcome that really important deficiency. So as I say, that's really low-hanging fruit that immediately moving to your own customised lick and including copper if you need it, you've already gained an advantage over the commercial product.
Yeah, I just have so many questions because I can't resist asking, even though we didn't rehearse it, so sorry. But I am curious, did you do any blood tests on animals as well, or are you just looking at you did? Or you're just looking
blood
at the
tests
soil?
for copper are really important because you want to make sure that you actually are deficient because of the toxicity that I mentioned. So we did soil tests, pasture tests, blood tests, liver tests.
That's fantastic. You like that nitty-gritty, don't you?
Yes.
Yes, you were not lying to us. Fantastic. And so can you talk to us more about the decisions that could be made using a soil moisture probe? And I'm really excited about this because, as I mentioned, we've got the Farming Forecaster moisture probe set up on our property on Flinders Island. So if you could just email me and write down a few things as well. That would be really fantastic because I need to learn more about this.
Sure. As I mentioned, the spring flush is the most important time of the year for us, and that's where the biggest bang for your buck is made from the soil moisture probe. As an example, this year we've come to the end of our winter and on my mum and my farm, we have a full soil moisture profile. So we know that coming into spring we're going to have maximum potential for the spring flush. However, at the start of August, and I was talking to Rob about this, happened in Tasmania as well, we had a spate of 7 really bad frosts in a row. And so all the growth stopped. The lamb skins went a little bit dry, and it was a bit like, you get a bit nervous, like, I should be making some decisions now, what should we be doing to combat this? Looking at the soil moisture probe, I can see that this spate of cold soil temperatures didn't happen last year. It was anomalous. And so just riding out this period, I'm not going to wean my lambs because I know it's only temporary, and I am going to supplementary feed because I know it will pay off. As soon as the soil temperature hits 12 degrees, we've got a full profile behind us, and we can, the feed's going to go berserk.
Yeah, we're kicking off.
Yeah. And another example, knowing that we're going to have this really great spring flush means that we can go in, spray out a couple of paddocks and sow some spring fodder crops because we know we can afford to take those paddocks out of the system.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Jess.